Hello and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. This is episode 140, and the title is Road to Nowhere.
Oh, man. Oh, geez.
This is my partner and good friend, Jim Stam. How the hell are you, brother?
Road to Nowhere. We could have led with some Ozzy Osbourne and, and got it going that way, too, just,
Absolutely.
with the song title. But, yeah, man, this is going to be a good show. It's going to be a fun show. It's a tough show. I like to have some really good ideas and thoughts about how to address things.
Yeah.
And right now it's dicey. So, yeah, let's jump into it.
Right. And I see Matt's with us here. He's already starting the Haynes has to go. We'll get there. I promise you we will. Got our buddy Ethan over at Locked On Pirates. Hello, gentlemen. Doing good, Ethan. Glad to see you here. So we have a bunch of stuff to go over in this show, Jim. We've got a poll question. We have to talk a little bit about Paul Skenes. I mean, dude is ready, Jim. I mean, time to discuss that.
Yeah.
We want to hit on, hey, what the hell can we actually fix here?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we agree, Andy Haynes. We've done that for most of the 140 episodes I just talked about us doing. We've been talking about getting rid of him, but let's look a little deeper than that. Things that we think we can actually change. And a little surprise for Jim. I've been looking at some new kind of stats. He always loves that stuff. That's going to be a lot of fun. But Jim, I think we should start out with your poll question, man, because it's kind of foundational, right? I mean, it's at the very, very core of where people's headspace is. So you want to read it or you want me to read it?
No, go ahead.
All right. Well, now I have to click a button. So let's see. You asked, who or what is the main culprit when it comes to the struggles of this organization? It was overwhelmingly development, 77%. Players got 8%. I'm not sure, got 11. 4 got drafting. And if you had Bob Nutting on there, he'd probably get the 77%. So,
I mean, look, he was left out purposefully. That's too easy. There are plenty of teams. Well, there are some teams that overcome their owner, right?
Right.
So that's why I didn't put him on there.
No, you said you disagreed with the findings here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where I would have landed either. In fact, it's not where I did land when I voted. But anyways, go ahead. Say your piece.
Yeah. Okay. So look, first of all interconnected, right? Like you can't really discuss one without the other, and they lead into one another and so on and so forth. But looking big picture on everything, I think if you go by player, it's easier to land on development, right? That's how I look at it. But when I start to come back up off the page and look a little further away, I start going to the drafting. That's where I start to land, because the more you hit on the drafting part of it, the easier it is to develop these guys, in my opinion. So that's where I eventually landed. I think there's just too many examples across the board where guys aren't working out, that maybe you're just not hitting on the right picks to begin with.
Yeah, maybe I didn't even look at it in that way. I kind of looked at it more as you were asking, what's the culprit of the struggles of this organization? I kind of took it as why are we the way we are? Not necessarily, why are we the way we are now that Ben Cherington's here? It was more just, how did we get here? How have we sucked for this long? Even with financials being what they are. And I just can't go anywhere but drafting. It's the first thing that pops into my head. I can't help it. It literally just, it's unavoidable, that laundry list of first round picks that never made it and never played a game here, and if they did, it was not a good experience. I don't know how you avoid that, and I don't think that that's all development, because none of them went anywhere and did anything, So it's not like somebody picked them up and they were like, "Oh, I fixed that talent for you." These were just not good talents.
Yeah, the old saying that I always come back to sometimes is, and it's super eloquent, by the way, is the old saying is that just because you pour syrup on shit, don't make it pancakes.
Yeah.
I look at it like that when it comes to some of this, like, and I stumbled across something the other day, and it was actually Nick Saban talking about like how players, what separates players, right, and athletes and whatnot. And he actually talked about baseball, which I thought was really interesting. And he said that, like, once you get past, like, they're all good athletes. They're all good athletes. Yes, you have work ethic and all that stuff, but then it comes down to some of the things that you just can't measure and evaluate very well, which is like decisions in the moment, in the millisecond, like how to swing at that, to not swing at that, to decide whether that's a breaking ball or a fastball. All those little things, like, eventually players have to figure that stuff out. And so for me, it just struck me as like, yeah, that's the tricky part. They're all really good athletes and players when they're drafted, are they not?
And like Robert Hagelin, he says, you would think that an organization would accidentally make the right pick occasionally. Seems this one has only done it a couple times this century. Well, yeah. And I would say, like, the early part of that century that you're talking about, money was a big concern. They were picking guys that would sign for what they wanted to pay. The slotting system has taken a lot of that away from them. And to their credit, they broke the old system to make the slotting system happen by signing Josh Bell in the second round for what they did. So,
right.
I mean, like, if you ever want to give them credit for changing baseball in any way, shape, or form for the better, that's something they actually did. So, yeah, I mean, I think drafting is where I lean, but I guess, drafting and development always go hand in hand. So it's
they
kind
do.
of like,
I mean, yeah, eventually, like, okay, let's say whatever that magic, like, sauce is, like the Orioles seem to have it, right? Like, they can just pick hitters and hitters and hitters. Like, they just get that right. Okay, let's say you don't have that kind of luck or whatever you want to call it, skill. You should still be able to be pulling some things out of guys and making them the best that they can be. And I don't even know if we're seeing that. So I will give people that, which is they don't even really kind of turn, somebody that's struggling into something decent, which that's a problem too.
I mean, and then a lot of their picks, they look like, Cole Tucker. Like, he just got back to the league. We're actually, oddly enough, probably going to see him here when the Angels come to town. But, that's a long project. He was drafted in 2014 or something?
He's been around.
I mean, like, dude, it's been 10 years. So did the Angels get credit if he somehow turns out into anything? I guess. Do they? But, like, bad draft pick. You don't want a number one pick taking 10 years to get here and do anything, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what we're staring down the barrel of now, even with people have had the Huntington-Sherrington debate. Sherrington's got a couple under his belt right now in Henry Davis and Nick Gonzalez that, they just can't be missing on those guys. I'm not saying they have completely, but things have not gone as well as we would have hoped, to say the least.
No doubt. Hey, let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's pick up talking about Paul Skenes. We got to knock that subject out, I think.
Sounds good.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Jim, Paul Skenes, the dude's ready, right? I mean, like, he's finally gone 6 innings, an 0.39 ERA. I mean, I don't know what else you could ask from him. He's rolling. So are the Pirates starters right now. So I kind of want to discuss this a little bit because first, I can't remember this situation. I can't remember a starting pitcher being so obviously ready in the minors and having a team. I'm not going to say not need him because I think he could walk on this team and be one of their best starters like tomorrow.
Sure.
But you have a lot of other things to consider, right? As a fan, I want to see him. And I think he's ready to be here. So go ahead and bring him up, right? But who goes for him? Quinn Priester is like a number 1 pick too. That's just starting to get his sea legs under him. That's 2 decent starts in a row now he's laid down. That's what you want to see from him, right? Mm-hmm. Martin Perez coming out of the I don't think so. Bailey Falter's been great except for that last start. You know, do you give him such an insanely short leash that he has one more iffy outing and he's booted out of that rotation? Keller not going anywhere. Jones, long as he's pitching, he's sticking. Mm-hmm. So what do you think? What should they do, man? Like, I know pretty firmly they don't want to go with the 6th man.
Yeah, because that creates some things too, right? So I'm first and foremost, he's ready. You bring him up. That to me is the no-brainer right now. Is like, I know he can't hit, and that's kind of like the issue with this team. But I do think just bringing a guy up with this kind of this caliber, with this pedigree, injecting they're as lifeless and as neutered as of a team as I can remember. I would do that. If nothing else, for just having a guy in there that, you know, is him, and I really do think he is him. I don't know, Gary. Roansy Contreras keeps coming up in my mind as the guy that I feel like is the most expendable.
Not a starter.
I don't know.
Though.
Huh?
Not a starter though.
No. I'm talking about spot. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't have a problem getting him a spot. I'll pick anybody from the bullpen for a spot. Mm-hmm. I mean, in all sincerity, we're talking about where does he go in the rotation. I don't know how you make that choice. I don't know how you go like, yeah, Bailey Falter is the only one that makes any logical sense. And that's only because, you know, you don't necessarily picture him being in this rotation 3 years from now, you know? Mm-hmm. But it's still tough. He hasn't done anything wrong.
No. And as a matter of fact, he's been just as good as anybody not named Jared Jones, probably.
Right.
So,
like Robert here says, you know, Bucks have the same record as they do now. If Skenes is here, no rush. I feel that, as jaded as it is. They're not scoring enough runs to support anybody. That said, you're probably to the point right now where you start counting innings and going like, okay, now he's wasting them by throwing them down there. Mm-hmm. He's stretched out. He's ready to go. Let's do it.
I do think Falter has some. Yeah, I do think Falter has some positive attributes to putting him in the pen. As far, you know, he's a lefty. He's doing pretty well at getting guys out from both sides of the plate. He's certainly stretched out. You can use him in a lot of different ways. I think there's an argument to be made that is who that would be. Priester, I'd hate to do that to him, just simply because you're finally seeming like you might be getting somewhere with him, and then to turn him into, ask him to do something different. I would prefer not to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know that Priester gets anything else going down to AAA. I actually think he's kind of, he's shown them what he's supposed to show them down there. He's done what they asked. He's come up here. He's doing what they asked. He's working all of his pitches in the zone, trusting it. Give up a couple solo home runs. That's okay. You're going to have that. Jones is doing the same thing, being aggressive, right? So if it's good for him, it's good for Priester. Just because he's not throwing it 100 miles an hour when he does it doesn't mean that it's the same exact intent. I guess you want Priester to pan out. So you kind of can't just send him down. I think you got to keep trying with him. I think it is going to have to be Bailey Falter. They're going to have to push him to the bullpen.
Yeah, and like I said, I think there are some things that fit him well right now. How he's been pitching, I think it translates. I'm sure he won't be thrilled with that. I mean, the way he's pitching, but it is what it is. I don't see any sense in keeping Skenes down any longer than they have to at this point.
Right. Our buddy OSU Bucks here, he says Bailey's going to have balls flying out for home runs within a few weeks as the weather warms up. We all know he's better in the bullpen long term. I'm not sure we do. Lots of fly balls to the track that will go out for home runs very soon. I don't think anybody's been enjoying David Bednar giving up home runs in the bullpen. So if you really think that's what his future is, then I don't know that I'd be talking about him being great. Casey Hercula brings up a 6-man rotation. No, they will not do it, Casey. I know this. It ain't happening. And they have stressed, I tell you, getting Paul Skenes on schedule this whole time. They're not going to bring him up and then throw him off of the schedule that they've worked so hard to get him on. That just doesn't make sense this year. I think they're going to go with 5, whether it's smart or not. Why waste service time with Skenes, I hear from Matt Plott. I don't know how you could consider it a waste if he's up here pitching well and, doing what a major league pitcher does. At some point you're going to have to get him up here and pitch him. I mean, like, if you think you're going to win this year, you go with your best horses. I think he's one of their best horses. You get him up here. You're going to have the same conversation next year? I don't think so.
Yeah, right, because you would essentially be in the same spot of not knowing, right? Not knowing where if the team, let's say the team has a similar record, and you cannot keep a guy like this in the minors when you say you're ready to compete and you can clearly use someone of his caliber in some way, shape, or form.
I mean, plus let's take emotions out of it and reason and common sense too. Like I said, like Martin Perez isn't going anywhere because he's signed to a contract, right? So he's here for the year, and they're paying him a decent amount of money. He's got bullpen experience. He's a guy that could transfer to the bullpen over time. But just right now, he's eating the hell out of innings for you. Mm-hmm. That's what you want him to do. So you need him. He's in your rotation for that reason. Quinn Priester, we talked about emotionally. I'm not 100% sure that I would have him replaced by the newest flavor. Like when he hasn't done anything wrong necessarily. If he starts to falter or fail, okay, then yeah, you make that switch directly for him. But that would be like the most in your face, you've just been jumped move you could do. And I'm not sure I would go that route.
Well, to the point of where he just started to show some kind of getting a foothold, right? Yeah. Is that really what you want to do with that guy? And I will say, Matt says on here, the Pirates suck, so no competing is happening. I'm telling you what they're saying, what they are saying. So that's on the Pirates. All I know is that's what they said. If you're serious about that, then Skenes is up. There's no way around that.
Pretty much. All right, so it's going to be something interesting to see. I mean, again, I don't think there's much purpose in keeping him down there. They've already announced his next start is Sunday, so we know that's going to happen. But after that, I could see the 10th. That makes a heck of a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because it's against Cubs, right? So
Yeah.
you definitely want to get that going. And I think it would probably be a good time to bring him up against a division rival. Let's go ahead and get it started right then. Sell the place out, hopefully re-energize the team a little bit. Hopefully coming off of a good Rocky series, because something like that needs to happen. You know, they need to come out and do something coming off of that, of what they've done on the West Coast there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I posted earlier about just how bad the Rockies have been. I mean, they've trailed in every game. They're 2-13 on the road. They're a really bad baseball team. I feel like it's early May, but if they don't come out and play well this series, and you got to win the series, I think it's a big turning point this early, quite honestly.
So let's talk a little bit about things we think they could actually do. Okay.
Okay.
And we talked a little bit about some guys that could come up. I think those can be some of our suggestions. But let's just go back and forth. Let's make some suggestions on things we think they could do. And I'm going to start with one I kind of brought up on Twitter the other day, and I think it's going to make some people's heads explode. I think I'd start Jack Sawinski and play him every single day against righties and lefties, unless it's a real tough lefty, for a couple weeks. Jack Sawinski is too streaky to just be in the lineup every once in a while if you want to get anything out of him. I just feel like you have to keep him in there long enough to catch a hot streak, or it's just not worth having him. If they're going to keep playing him spotty like this, I'm cool with them sending him down for somebody else.
The funny thing about this, Jack, here we are once again with Jack, right? Like the most curious, divisive player that I think we can possibly talk about. Now he's giving us other reasons to do this. But yeah, to me, Gary, the way this team is not hitting, if you're going to tell me that you have a guy that last year hit 25 home runs and had an OPS near 800, and then you look and see what they're going through right now, I'm playing him. Like,
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out, and it'd be one thing if they had great options to go to behind him, and you just said, well, we can't afford it, Jack. We can't afford the time to have you figure it out and go on one of your streaks. We've got guys waiting. Who are those people?
Exactly.
They're just not there. So, like, he's at least done it last year, and people look at his numbers last year and they kind of crap on him. I don't look at it that way. He had 75 walks. He hit 25 bombs. I think a 789 OPS, on base percentage of around 340, 350. That's a guy that I'm giving every opportunity. I'm begging him at this point, and yes, I'd be playing him. I would.
I just think it's counterintuitive, because you're trying to get the numbers going, and his batting average is awful. I just think his batting average is always going to kind of be awful. But Jack's here to run into baseballs and hit 230-ish, 220-ish, and hit 25, 30 home runs. That's what he's going to do if you play him most days. He's on one day. I think he started the season, he didn't even look like he was on the team. Like, you got to play that guy. If you don't, I just don't know what he's doing here.
Right. And it's so weird, because I went back and I looked at it, and, like, surprisingly, Jack has like the 5th most plate appearances on the team. And
I'm
coming
in late in games a lot.
Yeah. Like, because it surprised me. I'm like, that can't be. Like, he doesn't seem to be playing that regularly. But it is the very situational stuff that you brought up, which is he really the kind of guy that you think you want coming in to do some pinch hitting duties? And I don't think that really suits him all that well, unless you're looking, There are worse guys to have to call into those situations if you need a home run.
Right.
But I do feel like he's kind of like a running back. You got to give him enough carries.
That's kind of what I think too. I just don't think he's a player that you're going to get anything out of spotty playing. That's all. And I've always cringed about him being a platoon player for the same reason. Because I think he's a guy that when he doesn't see pitches consistently, he doesn't get himself where he needs to get himself. So
and then ironically this year, he's hit lefties a little bit. It's a very small sample size, but and that's him, right? Like he's always adding something else to confuse you. He really is.
So try something else, right?
I will go back to if there were options behind him, I would be open to having this discussion. I just don't know what those would be, Gary.
All right, what's your first solution?
Okay, it's funny because I think even maybe last week, I probably poo-pooed this a little bit, and I'm gonna go the opposite way with it now, just because it's all hands on deck time. I'm playing Connor Joe. I'm playing him probably almost every day. He's been one of their best hitters. I understand the problem with him is, sometimes he gets exposed the more. I'd play him.
Mark Lancaster now wears fruit of the loom because of Andy Haynes. Thank you very much, sir.
Mark, if you have a picture of that, don't send it. Just we'll take your word for it. But no, Gary, I'd play Connor Joe, and I'd put Connor Joe somewhere in the lineup, in the middle of it, most games.
Can I throw first base in there? I want him at first base. I think that solves two problems. I think playing him predominantly at first base gets Rowdy Tellez out of the lineup, and gets Connor Joe's bat in there consistently. Plus, if they're going to do what we said about Sawinski, we need Connor Joe to be playing first base to keep that open all the time out there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think those two kind of go hand in hand. Connor Joe at first base for the most part, Jack Sawinski in the outfield, right field or center. Doesn't matter.
How could you look at Connor Joe and look what they're going through for the last 3 weeks and say, no, thank you, not today?
When I get into these stats that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, it's undeniable that Connor Joe is their absolute best hitter.
Well, good for Connor Joe, bad for the Pirates. That's all I can say.
Very much so. All right. So let's see. I have another one here. I think it would be best for the team if Andrew McCutchen would lead off and stay in lead off and let everything else fall where it may. He hits better up there. I think he has the best eye on the team. If you want somebody up there taking a bunch of pitches and kind of leading the way and showing you what the pitcher has, he's the best one to do that. The only problem I have with that, Jim, is for some reason, they're really not playing him very much. They're either trying to convince him that this should be his last year, or he can't do it. And in that case, I hope he's convincing himself that it should be his last year, because we're carrying a DH spot that isn't fielding except for very late in games a couple times and isn't playing most games.
Yeah. Again, to me, it's one of those ideally situations. Would I like to be careful with Kutch? But again, I think it's all hands on deck. I'd put him at the top of the lineup, and just and this comes back down to, again, maybe getting some stability in the lineup, right? Like, I know they're trying to play matchups and that side of it, but that also hasn't worked. So I would like to get,
in general, maybe we're kind of like going to go back and forth on this the whole time. In general, when you are swapping guys in and out of the lineup, half of them very unestablished, borderline major league players, some of them veterans that are used to kind of like getting the feel for the season and getting into the season, guys that haven't been platoon players, but now you're asking them to be platoon players, and you're not letting anybody get their feet under them. Like, nobody is really getting on a streak. The only guys you're playing daily are like Brian Reynolds and Cabrian Hayes. They're playing almost every day. O'Neal Cruz is playing almost every day. We're seeing a lot of these bit players start to kind of show something, and then all of a sudden they're not in anymore. Even Kutch, back-to-back home runs to open up games. Now he sits. All of a sudden now, leadoff spot that worked great. Nah, we're going to use Cabrian Hayes. Why? Why change that now? Like, you were starting to find a little something with that top of the lineup. Like, Hayes and Reynolds and McCutcheon looked pretty good for a couple games there. All of a sudden, no. Let's pull that back. Why? You got to let people have some continuity. You have to let people have a chance to look at pitches 3, 4, 5 days in a row and kind of start to fine tune whatever it is they're trying to work on. You can't do that stuff in the cage.
I agree. I've always thought stability is better. And let me throw this out to you. There's just this random question, because it almost seems to be it's not, but it almost seems to be contractual at this point. Can Brian Reynolds not do anything but bat second? Like everybody else gets yanked around the lineup like crazy, and I understand, your best hitter, you usually put him in 2 and so on and so forth. But man, he is just the one guy that they do not move. They do not move him.
I mean, you talked about, like, is there a better alternative? Like, when we were even talking about like an outfield position, there isn't. Who else looks like a number 2 hitter on this team?
Probably not a lot of guys.
I think you're bitter because he had 3 bad bases loaded appearances in a row.
Not. I actually still think I'm actually not upset with Brian Reynolds' performance this year. It just kind of crossed my mind that, like, they don't have a lot of guys that are ideal fits for a lot of things, but he just isn't. He just is the one that does not move. And my whole thought to that was like, man, if you could just get him like at 3, and then find like, I don't know, Connor Joe at 2 or something, and like extend, like, deepen that a little bit, try that.
Yeah.
But Gary, I'm spitballing, dude. Like, things are not pretty right now.
Yeah, it comes down to they just need to start doing damage on pitches for real. Like, they're not putting solid swings on pitches that they're getting, and they're missing opportunities left and right. Runners in scoring position is one thing, and there's no measurement for clutch. Clutch is, kind of a made up thing, but you can just look at it and see the first half of the season. Josh just wrote a nice piece about this on Steel City Pirates this week. Just came up today. You can see the first half of the season, at least the first 16 games, they're hitting with runners in scoring position. Second half of the season so far, absolutely not. I mean, like, it really comes down to that. They're not capitalizing on anything. They're still getting guys on base. I mean, those numbers are actually disturbing when you look at them. In some ways, they're getting more guys on. And the funny thing is, they have less at bats. I didn't even think about it until I read Josh's piece today, actually. He said, like, you have to think, you have to factor in with this offense as bad as it is. You can't just go like, hey, they hit less doubles in this second half of that opening month, because you have to factor in how bad the offense was. They have 3/4 of the at-bats because nobody's hitting.
Right.
So there's much less opportunity to do anything.
Yeah,
and it makes your opportunities that much more precious and puts more importance on every single one of them. It's crazy, really.
It is
how drastic it is.
Well, and then it's one thing to have a couple guys struggling, but when you have 3, 4, 5, 6 guys with OPSs in the 500s, like that's not just struggling. I know people are talking about Cruz struggling. O'Neal Cruz is struggling. At least he's in the 630s in OPS. Like, yeah, it's not good by any stretch of the imagination, but he's, man, there are other guys that aren't just, I mean, Rowdy and Triolo. I mean, can we talk about him a little bit, Gary? Maybe.
Sure.
I mean, look, I like the guy. I think he's a very solid piece to a team. But you look at his numbers overall defensively. Look, we know what he is. You know what I mean. But there's nothing coming from him at the plate. Nothing. And he's, I think he's 4th on the team in at bats right now.
Right. Yeah, he's played just about every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you played Alika every day, he'd probably get exposed too.
Of course. Yeah, of course. So maybe that brings me to my point. Then it leads me right into ways to improve things. I will say this with the caveat that I'm quite sure they don't want to bring him, who I'm about to mention, up and have him fail again. At some point, aren't you looking at Nick Gonzalez? Are you not at some point?
You're going to have to look at Nick Gonzalez, if only because his numbers say so. But
yeah,
his underlying numbers,
I know,
tell me it ain't going to last long.
I
think
know,
you might catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle. My problem with bringing Gonzalez up is when you bring up a number 1 pick, much like we're talking about with Priester, you got to give him a month and you got to play him. Like you can't bring him up and sit him on the bench. He's got to come up and play. That's fine. I think at the beginning he would give them a little bit of a charge. And I think he can play defense really well at second base. I actually think he might even be able to fill in at third okay. But do I think it's going to last? No. Also,
no, I
don't think they need more right-handed hitting, Jim. I think they need left-handed hitting. I'd bring up Bay.
They probably don't need it, but again, I just come to, and I'm quite sure they want to give him as long as they possibly can to, once they make this determination with him and call him up, that, like you said, they're gonna have to play him, right? They're gonna have to. But not a great option. But I'm also seeing what's going on at the major league level, and I can't be okay with that either, you know?
I think I might bring up Bay. I really do. But the left-handed hit, he looks like he's doing pretty well. He's fast. He's running again. Defense looks a little cleaner, at least in the outfield. That's where they've been focusing on playing him. Gives you a real good tandem with Taylor. You probably don't feel like you have to play him every single day because he's not like a top prospect type guy anymore.
Well, and then you get to the fact that if he does get on, at least he can maybe make some things happen. Yeah. They're so lifeless on offense. I would tend to agree with you there, which is at least he might stress a team if he can get on base. Now that's the big question, right? Can he get on base enough?
Yeah. So I think I'd love to use some of these comments if you guys would start smartening up. I'm not gonna put them up. Some of them, okay? Like some of them are just silly. Like we like to try to have serious conversation here. I'll gladly put it up, but make some sense, okay? The Bay thing for me is a dicey one because I don't necessarily think he'll help for long either. But I just think he has some attributes this team misses, like real bad. They do miss some speed. They do miss some kind of electricity. They do miss somebody that can slap baseballs around. And it looks like in the minors, that's what he's back to trying to do, as opposed to trying to golf home runs out all the time, which is what he did do that kind of got him there in the first place. So I'm happy with that. Gonzalez, I think he's done enough to be interesting. I just think he's going to come up here, and the same
Oh.
book that worked on him last year will work on him again because he has not fixed it.
I agree. At least he's swinging the bat better in general. I think eventually over time the same problems creep up. But how long can they let what's going on now go?
Also, I would say they probably would have made a move already if they were going to. That's been their history.
I kind of thought today you would see if there was something going to happen. I would have expected to see it today.
Yeah, that's been their history this year. They've been, pushing guys down like before the off day, and then bringing somebody up on the day they come back. So I haven't seen that. That makes me feel like they're almost going to stick with it. The other guy we have to talk about that's going to come up here is Grandal. That's going to happen, Jim. And that's another possible thing that could kind of change. I don't trust his bat either. But I think he could come up here, play catcher that gets Henry Davis off of this roster. Henry Davis needs a reset. We said that last week. We probably said it the week before. I will say I was encouraged in his last game to see him hit a fly ball deep the other way.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is because he has not done anything but pull ground balls for like most of the season. So very good to see him take an approach that he had looked like he had mastered in the spring. He was drilling balls like to the opposite field gap in the spring, get into the season, and man, it all fell apart.
And he's still tinkering, right? Like I can see it in his at bats, and like he's trying some things out. That's really hard to do at this level. Like, in games that count, right? In real live major league ball games that matter. You don't want to be doing a whole lot of that in this setting. When it gets to the point, because I can be patient with guys because I think it's needed in baseball. But it gets to the point when I start feeling bad for someone personally as I'm watching them, that starts to let me give me an indication that it's probably time to let him give him a breather. My goodness,
I would agree, and I think when you get to the point where you're playing like a Joey Bart, 3 times to Henry's 1, you're probably already made that decision that he's going down. That's why I think it's such a foregone conclusion that
well, they were pinch hitting for him in critical situations.
Yeah, and they should. He's not hitting, but that stuff.
But if you're doing that, you're already saying,
it's time, right? So that sort of thing has to happen. I think that's important.
But then you get to the point where how much can Grandal even handle? And Bart, look, he's done well, but I think you're going to definitely see that come back down to earth. I think
we already have seen it come back down to earth. Let's just not forget he just had 2 pretty bad series too. So I think nobody's controlling the run game, so it doesn't even matter if Grandal can throw anymore. The thing is, if Grandal's good at all, does have some first base experience, decent amount, he could be our ticket out of Rowdy. And I know I see a lot of Jake Lamb. I don't care. They could do that tomorrow. It wouldn't bother me at all. But they picked one already in the spring, and you're not going to see them give up on that in a month. So even while we say start Connor Joe, screw Tellez, they're not going to do that yet. They're not going to agree with us there. But this isn't about what they agree with. This is what we say. So
right. And Doug put on here any rumors of like players only meetings or anything like that. Man, in baseball, I don't know that much comes from those. Like, what are you going to stand up and say with a bunch of guys that aren't that are trying to do everything they can and they're just not performing? I don't know that there's I just don't know in baseball that there's that works a whole lot. I just don't.
I don't know that it helps some of the people that are struggling the most right now. Anyway, I'm not sure they're receptive to that. I mean, who's going to be doing the preaching right now? Is what I would ask. Like, is it literally Connor Joe standing on a chair in the middle of the room yelling? He's the only one doing anything.
I just picture Alika Williams hiding in the corner, eating a piece of cheese, listening very quietly to whatever's going on, and no one's really saying a word. I don't know, man. A players meeting. I don't think a players meeting fixes what they're going through.
I don't either. So, hey, let's take another quick break, Jim. Come back. Let's do call your shot real quick, and we'll do some stats because that's always fun too.
Cool.
What do you say, Yin's commercial or DK commercial?
Yin's.
Yeah, here he is. All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Jim just had his Yinzer level raised a little bit there.
Man, I want that as my ringtone, Gary. if I knew how to get a ringtone, that is.
I don't know how to do it anymore either. It's been quite some time since I've been able to do something like that. All right, so call your shot this week is our friend Fred Fry. And he asks us, actually, I should play the theme, huh? Call Your Shots brought to you by our friends over at shopyins.com. All kinds of great stuff there. And for his awesome question, Mr. Fred Fry is going to be getting a special discount code. All you have to do is follow Shop Yins on Twitter or Facebook and DM them, and they will make sure that they give you the appropriate award for being the Call Your Shot guy this week. So, Mr. Durf, as he calls himself, Fred Fry, lots of calls for replacing Andy Haynes, but what direction to go? Any ideas, choices for replacement? I think they would probably go internal. I think they would probably bring up Munson from AAA. I know that's not what people are going to want to hear, but they believe in their system. And when Milwaukee fired Andy Haynes, they didn't change their system. They loved the system. They just said we needed a new voice or somebody that could get across their message a little bit better.
Yeah, it's not the system, it's the message. Before you go to that first.
Yeah. So I think that's probably what they would do. I would think Munson would come up from AAA. I don't know that, of course, but that's what I would assume.
Yeah.
And you haven't heard any rumors, have you?
None whatsoever. And I really am to the point with, I think it has to be done. I just don't know. And this leads right into his question and who you said, which is, is anyone going to come in here, on a white horse and save this thing? I don't know that that's the case. Like, eventually players have to swing at strikes when it's 2 strikes, and it is eventually just going to fall on them to be making better decisions and having better at bats.
I think that this leads so perfectly into this stat thing. You're going to love this so much, Jim. I have to get into it because what you just said is perfect.
Okay.
I've been looking at this stat called StatCast Swing Take. Okay. And it takes splits. It takes the splits of hitting into 4 zones. Okay. First is the heart. It's the very heart of the strike zone.
Center cut.
Center cut. What some of Yins would call down the pipe. Okay. Like, that's the good stuff, right? That's what everybody wants. Next is the shadow. That's all around the edges. Okay. So it's the edges of the strike zone. Basically, if you take the shadow, you shouldn't bitch that you got called a strike. Okay. So Brian Reynolds likes to take a lot of shadow pitches and calls them balls, but they're not. Chase is the next one. That's right outside of that zone. So that's not touching the black. That's outside of the zone. It's an official chase. And then the other one is a waist. That's like your Aroldis Chapman 102 to the brick and bouncing it 10 feet in front of the plate type pitch.
Right.
Okay. So they measure each of these zones, how many pitches you get there, how many swings you take, how many takes you take for those pitches. Okay. In those individual zones.
And takes.
Takes and takes. And they'll go even further. They do run value definition here for what they actually measure. It's the run impact of an event based on runners on base, outs, ball, and strike count. They have this whole formula behind it. I'm not 100% sure I buy that aspect of it yet, but the raw numbers are pretty interesting as far as like who does what. Do you want to play a little bit with this, Jim?
Sure.
All right. I'll let you even call out names later if you want, like just to kind of see where they're at. I don't care where they're from.
Okay.
Let's do one that's just universally elite bat, right? Everybody knows it's a great bat. Mookie Betts. Let's talk
Never
about
heard of him, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, in the heart of the zone, Mookie Betts swings about 67% of the time, and he takes about 33% of the time. You know, we talk about guys never taking, right? When it's right down the middle, but everybody does because everybody gets got. It's the way baseball is. You're going to get fooled sometimes. In the shadow, this is surprising. Mookie Betts swings only 40% of the time and he takes 60%. That means he doesn't like borderline really, borderline in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
Chase, only 12% of the time does he swing. 88% of the time he takes. You'll find that most pitches everybody sees are in the shadow zone. Every player, because everybody's trying to paint edges. Right?
Yeah, everyone's trying to live there. Every pitcher. Yeah.
In waste pitches, Mookie Betts takes 94% of the time. Okay. Now, if you want to believe in their run value thing, he's producing 13 plus 13 swing runs based on his swing decisions and plus 11 take runs on his take decisions. That's cool.
Okay.
You get into the Pirates' best hitter, and I mean by far, Connor Joe. Okay.
All right.
But we're always talking about these take decisions, right? We're always talking about how they're just staring at balls right down the middle. We talk about them all, right? Connor Joe, heart of the plate, 74% of the time, swing. 31% of the time, or 27% of the time he's taking. And he's doing damage when he actually hits the ball, too.
Well, he's hunting. He hunts.
Yeah. Much like Mookie Betts. He takes the shadow a lot more. 57% of the time he takes that shadow pitch. 43% of the time he swings. Everything else is negligible. He lays off the chase. He lays off the waste. But he's doing damage with balls that are in that zone. You go to someone like Cabrian Hayes, take a stab at how often he's swinging at pitches in the heart of the plate.
Well, considering how this is going, I'm going to shift my percentage that way. 50%.
57%.
Okay.
Which is pretty low. And the thing is, he's not doing damage when he does. That's not his damage zone. His damage zone is in the shadow, where he swings 53% of the time and takes 47%. He's been a good hitter too. He has an absolute zero swing rate on waste pitches. So, yeah. I mean, he's got a good eye. He's making good swing decisions, you would say, universally. Maybe you'd like him to swing a little bit more at the heart. I think you would.
Yeah, back to the aggressiveness part of it.
Yep. I'm expecting, as a Pirates fan, to see this over and over and over and over again, right? That they're all just taking pitches down the heart. O'Neal Cruz, 63% of the time he swings. 38% of the time he doesn't. His problem is he's created -9 swing runs doing so. When he does hit it, it's crap. This is where, like, you're making good decisions. Shadow, 51%, 49%. great decisions, not hitting the ball. You're going to see it throughout. Good decisions are being made. Is it really the hitting coach if they're all making good decisions? I mean, I'm not trying to defend him, but like Henry Davis, heart of the zone, swings 73% of the time, take 27. His problem is his whiff rate is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Is like all I have in my mind as you're saying this is seeing Henry just miss on fastballs, just miss them, like not even fouling them off. He's just getting beat.
Exactly. One more here. Jack Sawinski, 76% swing, 24% take. That's not, I thought that'd be worse too.
That surprises me.
On the shadow, 52-48. So even there, most of the time, he's making the right choice.
Well, we talk all the time, Gary, about swing and misses and what you're doing with pitches in the zone, right? Like if you get them in the zone, you got to do something with them, because like what you're going through is talking about like living in the shadows.
Yep.
So if you are getting anything close to being in the heart, you got to do something with those. You have to be able to make those pitchers pay for those specific pitches. It's about hitting mistakes.
Yep.
It always has been.
It always has been, and making a good decision when you get one. And it looks like for the most part, everybody, maybe save Brian Hayes, because I really do think he should be swinging a little bit more at those pitches in the heart. And these aren't like entirely small sample sizes either. I should verify. Like,
can you pull
Brian
up anybody?
Hayes? What's that?
Can you pull up anybody?
Yeah.
What's Triolo looking like?
Triolo.
Because yeah.
All right. Triolo. Let's see. 80% swing in the heart. 21% not. Again, not doing damage with his swings, though. And then in shadow, 51%, 49. Now, he does chase more, 25%. He chases a lot more than most guys.
But 80% is telling. I mean, that
he's picking the right pitches. He's pulling the trigger. He just isn't doing damage. I think this is the overall theme. I actually think it kind of plays into a lot of what Josh was talking about with runners in scoring position. They're just not doing damage on their swing decisions. Jack, I think, is the one that you see it most tangibly with, because I don't think he's taking an aggressive cut at some of those pitches. I think he's barely getting to them or trying to just take them straight up the middle, and that's not what Jack does best, right? So there's been a little bit of a different approach on some of those pitches this year. But we keep talking about them trying to make contact and pull back and everything on these pitches and everything, or not being aggressive. The numbers tell me that they're being plenty aggressive, and they're making pretty good choices. They're just not doing the right things with those choices. Like, you can make the right decision to swing, but if you're not on plane and on time, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been harping on the fact that even when they are getting on, it's a lot of singles. Like even when they do kind of get a decent hit, it's they're singles and then they're walks, and then like that's tough to serve. You can't survive in baseball that way anymore. You really just can't.
No, I mean, like, I think that's probably the most frustrating thing about their offense is when they get up there, it almost doesn't matter what they're being preached. When they get up there, they change their approach on their own. You see the tight buttholes when they're standing there with the bases loaded. You see the bad approach. Like, Brian Reynolds had a 3-0 count the other night. And yeah, he got a bad strike call. I get it. But Brian, brother, you got to swing, man. Like, you know what this guy's going to throw you. He's got that one slider, and it's his kryptonite. It's his absolute kryptonite. If you look at how Brian Reynolds hits like sliders, he's -6 run value on the team, the absolute worst mark of any player on the team against sliders. against any pitch.
Well, you
want to pick.
get
That's the worst number that they have.
Yeah, well, he gets a slider in and under his hands, and he's in trouble. And I thought the at bat was okay. 3-0, questionable call. Then he gets a 3-1 at the top of the zone. It was a strike. And I'm sitting there, and the guy can't find the zone. So I'm sitting there, and I'm watching. I'm like, well, this guy throws a slider 81% of his pitches, but he can't find it, right? Like he had been wild with it. I said, he's coming with a slider. I said, if he's going to get beat here, he's going to make it the slider. I think Reynolds was looking for it. It was a really good slider. Baseball's frustrating sometimes. You can have a good at bat, and it can still end very badly.
It really can. So what do you think of that new stat? That's fun.
Yeah, no. I agree. And, I think like we both are of the mindset sometimes, like eventually a player has to be able to execute something, right? Like,
yeah,
what part of an approach can a hitting coach say that once a pitch is in the zone and it's a pitch you can hit or drive, or it's a mistake, you just, as a player, you have to be able to start to execute that. I don't know what a hitting coach at that point is going to be able to do.
I would agree. They're going to,
aside from getting you out of the counts in general, maybe like counts, right? Like we all know getting behind in the count is a huge factor.
Getting behind the count is not what you want, but they claim they're not teaching them that, right? There was this interview with Andy Haynes that Alex Stump did over at MLB.com. Right. We've heard a lot of these quotes before, but he got challenged basically. A lot of people are thinking that you're telling us, or you're telling the players to be patient and see pitches and all that. I've heard this from players. So I don't care what he's trying to say to them. That's what they're hearing. So his answer to Alex is, that's not accurate. That's never messaged that way. I've heard it 3 times from players. I mean, that's what they're taking, buddy. I'm sorry. Maybe you're misremembering what you told them. That's what they're taking. At some point, 2.5 years or however long it's been, you've had the worst offense in the league, or damn near. Enough's enough. I mean, if you want to tell me that the pitching coach doesn't matter, well, then it shouldn't matter to move on from him. Right? Like, get a different voice in there, see if it does anything. Maybe you find a guy that figures a way to get through to one player, and that's the difference. You find a guy that can help fix O'Neal Cruz. That's enough.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you can do that. I find it curious, just simply because, like, the coaching is something that, and it's no different in any other sport, but like Haynes is getting dog walked, and that's perfectly fine. But I don't ever hear Oscar Marine's name ever on in any way, shape, or form on any platform.
I've only heard it a couple times this year, and it's been for screwing up Chapman and Bednar, which is hilarious to think that Chapman's listening to him. First of all, that I laughed pretty hard when I heard that one. But yeah, you don't hear them when they do positive things. I get that. That's human nature, and I understand that. Andy Haynes, though, I don't know. The voice isn't getting through to people. I'm just saying that. I'm not hearing a lot of positivity. Some of the minor league guys that I still talk to that have been up and down, throughout the years, it's very much so that they are to be patient, be sure they're convicted of their swing, right? But you start putting a lot of things like that in a kid's head, and then they paralyze themselves. You can't do that. You can teach them like to pick up the spin and lay off it because this guy never throws an in the zone slider. You can do things like that. But this is supposed to be a mechanics expert. That's what he's supposed to be really good at, is fixing the mechanics of a swing. Well, I just told you, these guys are making really good decisions on when to swing. Maybe the mechanics aren't working.
Well, and it's got me thinking too, like when you watch a baseball game and you watch a starting pitcher, even if he's getting through the first couple innings, but he's not locating, right? You can see he's not hitting his spots. You can say, uh-oh, there's probably trouble coming because he's not hitting spots. He's getting away with it. Well, maybe we should be watching at bats that way too, with some of the stuff, which is, like you're watching the game. You don't need that little box to tell you whether that's a good pitch to hit or not. Start counting. Let's start counting, keeping a track of those. And you might, you won't need to go and look at the shadows anymore, or your site you're on, because you got to do damage when you get those pitches.
I think it's funny too, because this stat that I looked at, you can look at it for pitchers too. They talk about how often they throw it in these zones. You know what I mean? And Jared Jones is striking when you look at it. He throws it in the heart 32% of the time, which is crazy, right? And he gets a swing 77% of the time. But they've created -1 swing run, which means like they're completely ineffective on all those swings it pitches in the heart. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
you have to have
is neat.
You have to have exceptional stuff to live there. And well, you saw it with Mason Miller too, right? Like,
right.
Like if you've got a lot of velocity, a lot of movement, you can get away with it. So,
well,
very, very enlightening stuff today, Gary.
I don't think it was the most depressing show ever. We could have done worse, right?
Yeah.
It was up there, but yeah, I mean, you're not going to ever hurt my feelings talking about wanting to fire Andy Haynes. I'm all out of discussion points on it. I don't really care what he's preaching anymore. I've seen enough now that I don't expect it to get good enough to ever make it worth my while. Even if they wait, I just feel like there's a top of the mountain that doesn't reach where I want this team to reach. So I'd like to see him move on.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to, he's wearing that hat, right? And there's got to be some accountability at the end of the day. It might not work. Yankees went through that last year with Sean Casey. He came in and they actually got worse. Yeah. So, middle of the season, they tried to do it. They got nothing out of it. But, there's a standard there of something's not acceptable either. So the Pirates need to start telling themselves, okay, it's not acceptable. Sorry, you're the guy.
Yeah. And then the other side of it too that we never discuss enough is a ton of rookies, man. A ton of kids. Like, you have to be patient with them. It takes a while sometimes to onboard these kids. It really does. If you go around flushing everybody because they got sent back down once, like we're all ready to move on from guys like Nick Gonzalez or Quinn Priester already because they're shinier objects not too far off in the distance. You will mow through your system real quick, and you probably won't get where you want to get, and you'll probably miss some things that you probably shouldn't have missed. So
and the goal of these teams is when you do call someone up, that's important. The hope is that you don't have to send them back down, right? That they're ready, and then they won't have to do that.
Yes. Hey, Robert, everybody is a yes man. Every single one of them is a yes man, from Bob Nutting on down. For every team in the entire league, everyone under the owner is a yes man. Dusty Baker was a yes man. Joe Madden was a yes man. They all are, because you get fired if you're not. It's such a waste of a comment. Please just move on from it. They're all yes men. They all listen to their boss. Me too. I'm a yes man too. I said yes to my boss today when he told me to craft an email about something stupid that I didn't want to do. I'm a yes man. I mean, move on. So are you when you're told to go mix the paint at Lowe's. Calm down. That's all I got this week, Jim. Happy Buckos.
Yeah, I mean, somebody else put in there about, we didn't get to it about the trade thing. Well, I just, there's a lot of issues with that right now. I think at some point you can start talking about that, but that's a hard topic on May 2nd that teams are going to be willing to do that, and that that no one knows exactly what they have or what they're doing yet.
Everybody thinks they're going to pick the A's clean. Why would the A's trade anybody right now? They're in a division where everybody sucks. They're somehow in third place, right? As bad as they've tried to be. They're not going to do that.
2 games under 500, I think.
Yeah, and the guys that they're going to trade, they ain't trading Mason Miller. They just called him up. They've got him for 4 more years. They want him to be part of things for them.
And as great as he is, no one's going to give up a complete monster haul for him.
Right. Anyways,
his arm could explode tomorrow.
That's enough for this week, man. It was good stuff. Good, nice therapy talk today. We'll hope for next week that we're talking about somehow they've miraculously won, and maybe we can pick apart what they've done better. Because another week like that, and the conversations are just going to get more and more ugly.
Well, we deal with it with humor right now, because that's all we got, Gary.
I know. I put some Beavis and Butthead thing up there the other day, and someone was like, I see the narratives are alive and well. What narrative are you talking? It's a Beavis and Butthead cartoon. How much more obvious do I need to be that it's a friggin' joke?
Yeah,
it's Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, and if you can't, sometimes when there's nothing else to say, you might as well make a joke and have some fun with it, because that's how bad it's been.
Dude, if I'm going to be up at like 1 a.m. watching a game in San Francisco on a Tuesday night, pardon me, I'm going to make some jokes. I mean,
yeah. Hey, listen, if you can't make a joke when Henry Davis twerks the Pirates out of an out, then we can't be friends. I'm sorry. We can't.
Absolutely. All right, Ben, take it away.
Let's go, Bucks!
Yeah, buddy. All right, see you, everybody.